Keren Poliah is a Mauritian in her final year of a PhD at the University of Salford, UK. Her thesis, Words from World Watchers, tackles experiences with the occult in Mauritius, resists conventional Anglo-centric PhDs, and creates a space for the subaltern to be heard through research. Her interests include indigenous research methods, marginalized subjects, creative writing, and decolonizing research. She has an equality, diversity, inclusion role to decolonize the PhD at the University of Salford Doctoral School. Welcome. We're excited to have you, and we look forward to your presentation.
Thank you. Hi, hello everyone. Thank you first of all for these past wonderful days and for allowing me to be here to speak to you about my home. To me, home is the island of Mauritius, but as you've heard from the introduction, I am currently based at the University of Salford in the UK for my thesis and for research and work. So my presentation today covers the importance of my research. I am a writer, and creative writing is my discipline, so I will be reading excerpts from my nonfiction book, Still in Progress. We all wrote a paper for this conference, and I have not included the excerpts in the paper because my book will be published separately from the thesis. My thesis is on the experiences of Mauritians with the occult. The PhD itself comprises of 90,000 words nonfiction book and 40 to 30,000 words complementary discourses. As a child, I grew up with half of my family practicing sorcery and the other half being very religious. Since I loved reading, I casually searched for a book which would tell me about the Mauritian folklore, but I didn't find any, and I wondered why, because in other countries, witchcraft and religion is amply recorded. Eventually, I was motivated to start documenting what I knew and what others around me had experienced. I understood the importance of nurturing traditions and family stories passed on by our elders. I collected oral traditions, family stories, personal experiences, and these stories became part of my thesis, taking the shape of nonfiction narratives. In the book I am writing, each chapter is focusing on one Mauritian participant. I have 16 participants, and I am disguising them by fictionalizing parts of their identities to maintain confidentiality. Allow me to interrupt my explanation to give you an example by reading an excerpt from the first chapter of my book. The chapter I present to you focuses on Ali. In his story, we see the Mauritian Muslim community through his eyes as he witnesses possessions, exorcisms, or the chaos caused by jinns. His chapter starts like this. The woman was screaming inside this derelict mansion. The bravest of us men pushed the mansion's metal gate to let 9 men enter. As if she knew strangers had set foot on her barren land, the woman's high-pitched wail got louder and closer in anticipation. I stood among those 9, recording everything on my phone and lifting the camera over the brave men's back. The walls of this mansion were solid concrete, eroded by time and total abandon. Trailing plants had made it their mission to erase every trace of human existence over the past 20 years. We crushed their stems under our shoes and passed through the front gate as the woman started sobbing. She moaned unintelligible words among her sobs that felt desperate and full of hatred. Her screams seemed like she was having her womb ripped. This woman had been disturbing the whole neighborhood for nearly 4 hours. During the hour before sunset, everyone was worried and inquired about the screams, which brought our attention to the abandoned mansion. By the time the son went into complete hiding, the screams were slashed in two. A woman's voice and a deeper animalistic version of it. It was then that we confirmed that she, who screamed as if her life depended on it, was already dead. The screams were this monstrosity of woman and bear crossbreed, human but ghostly, one high-pitched, the other imposing a chilling sonority. 9 men had made their way to the mansion, empowered by Quranic verses to fight her. I should say it instead of her, but pronouns do not define evil spirits, whose boundaries and distinctions go beyond those our society enforce. Every man in front of the mansion, myself included, recited surahs as loud as we could in an attempt to fill our ears with Allah's words and drown away the spirit's voice. The brave men pushed against the lintel, saying, "Who could intercede in Allah's presence without his permission?" The entity shrieked in fear for the first time that night as we shouted verses at every step we took on the mud-cake tiles. When the last line of the verse finally ascended to Allah's ears, the entity fled and left us in silence as we scattered. It ended as abruptly as it had started, without any warning, so that the silence seemed to be a curse we had brought on ourselves, as we no longer knew where she was hiding. Those are the views of my participant, Ali. Before delving into anything else, though, I wish to briefly present our colonial history so that we can better understand the Mauritian view of the occult. Mauritius was an uninhabited island originating from volcanic eruption and without an indigenous population. It was discovered by Arab sailors, then it was explored by the Portuguese, but they did not settle. In the 16th century, the Dutch arrived and brought slaves. In 1710, they abandoned the island. By then, they had also made our endemic bird, the dodo, go extinct, and we're very sad about that. But 5 years later, Mauritius became Île-de-France under the French governor Bertrand François Maé de la Bourdonnais. The British also wanted to claim the island, so they fought with the French settlers until 1810. Then, Mauritius became a British colony. The population comprised of French and British settlers, African slaves, Indian immigrants, Chinese immigrants. Our native tongue is Creole Mauricien, or Mauritian Creole, known as the legacy of slaves and immigrants who adapted their ways over the years and created what we now know as the Mauritian culture. The French language remained more widely used than English, but we are required to be fluent in both for work and education. As I mentioned earlier, I also gathered records from our past to understand the extent of cultural influences on occult practices. During that research process, I came across discourses that promoted cultural and intellectual imperialism. In a letter from Port-Louis, the capital of Mauritius, to the London Times, the correspondence mentions that those of the lower classes of slaves and immigrants had less access to medical facilities. They had no coroner to investigate the death of immigrants and slaves. They did not investigate death and murders of immigrants, which were passed off as suicides for the sake of giving a simple verdict. There were various biases, prejudices, and racist views shared among the French and British colonialists. For instance, upon speaking about someone from a noble and educated class, they say, like all his class, he was profusely hospitable. It was assumed that the educated are influenced to believe in witchcraft by the people of the lowest order. The distinction between class and race is accentuated as the report says that the practitioners who promote the, I quote, diabolical doctrine are generally hideous blacks, and the more hideous they are in appearance, the better. The Saturday Review, under the title Witches in Mauritius, writes, "Now the Negro, wherever he goes, takes his fine, full-blooded theory of magic with him and believes in it so firmly that he gradually subdues the white men to his own beliefs." There was an ingrained mindset that every belief of the immigrants and slaves existed because they were ignorant and uneducated. If someone educated was taking part in any of these beliefs, then he had been subdued or influenced. Lee Herring explains past colonial perceptions on our folklore in Creole Mauritian. We don't have time to go through the whole quote, but you can read through the translation as I speak. I'll just read the first line. Li en fausse l'idée pour penser qui se situe parmi des gens ignorants ou bien ceux qui manquent l'éducation qui capable trouve folklore. The slave and immigrant had to hang on to their beliefs and ancient ways of survival when the colonies did not receive the competent French and British officials to set up effective systems to support colonial societies. Malaysian academic and sociologist Syed Hussein Alatas mentions how those who went to serve in the colonies were people who could not make good or who could not get jobs in England. Therefore, the colonists did not provide the resources and manpower needed to strengthen colonies or even support the people. And when the people resorted to their indigenous ways of survival, the colonists criticized them and proclaimed they were savages. In this way, the colonists actively engaged in creating and maintaining unequal relationships among different classes and ethnic groups. But the Mauritian population of slaves and immigrants eventually founded practices that would resist colonialism. The prime reason why these practices can be seen as resistance is because they have stood on firm ground all these years before and after and during the colonial era. In the colonial era, the Mauritians sought physical protection from the colonial masters through sorcery. In the present day, the Mauritian seeks success and solution to daily stress, anxieties, and relationship issues. Beliefs provided the population with more control over their situation as they faced imperialist rulers. And they currently still provide the Mauritian with more control over life and emotions. Let's look at one instance in the life of our participant Ali, who says, "Years ago, my mom and her cousin went to this lady who could tell if someone is afflicted by black magic. I could imagine the three women sitting at a round table, their eyes meeting over the glassy surface of a crystal ball, but I doubt that is what happened. In reality, those moments are less dramatic, have no crystal ball, and are usually spent in silence until the lady decides to speak, as if she has been listening to spirits whispering the past, present, and future in her ear. My mom probably unconsciously plucked at the dead skin at the corner of her thumbnail. Her cousin held a handkerchief, maybe, to damp the sweat from her palms. Somebody wants you and your husband to die," said the lady. "There is a doll sewn in your family's name, stuck in a tree, stuck so high that no one can reach it." My mom probably gasped under her burqa before the lady continued, "Your son, he will literally have to struggle so much that his elbows and knees will be ripped and he will have to crawl to obtain success." The practices of divination highlighted here are also very common in other countries. Over the years, witchcraft took the shape of modern pagan religions and new religious movements in the global north. But there were never any discussions to change the colonial perception of practices in the former colonies, nor were there any initiatives to understand the different religious beliefs held by each community. Pagans now distinguish between white magic of the global north and black magic of the global south, finding it difficult to separate curative magic, healing, religious animal sacrifices, or witchcraft that can cause death. As we've witnessed and heard through this conference, as researchers and academics, we can reframe existing perspectives of our beliefs and practices through our research, our writing, or our creative practice. Our narratives can be tales of people, tales of the field that previous researchers have forgotten or portrayed through their imperialist lenses. Our research can emphasize the emotional truth, pain, suffering that our people went through, because we often tend to be silent about the suffering of people, individuals, and small communities among all the historical and political events that get recorded. Just a cute out. Thank you.